Welcome everybody to the first and only episode, most likely, of Quarantine Corner. I'm your host, Nathan Edwards. Today with me, we have two very special guests. I have the co-hosts of the hit podcast on Spotify, On the Nose with Joey Eringman. These are two of my very great friends, Jim Palumbo and Joey Eringman. How's it going, guys?
Great, man. How are you?
I am probably warmer than you are right now. The weather has been fantastic.
Yeah, it's very cold here in Ohio, but thanks for having us. Absolutely.
I'm glad you guys could come on. So we have a very great episode today. As you know, the quarantine this year has really, and COVID in itself has really taken a lot from us. And the one thing that it has yet to take from us, and hopefully will never will, is our whiskey. That is exactly why we are here today. So we're going to talk about three different types of whiskeys, and Jim and Joey are going to dive into these with me and kind of explain it to you guys. I'm still relatively new at all of it, and I just got into this hobby right over the quarantine thanks to these two guys. A little backstory about them both. They started the podcast, they were inspired by the podcast because they went to Ireland and toured a bunch of distilleries. They were able to share a bunch of drinks with great people, and they were able to see a bunch of different forms of whiskey and taste a lot of different things. So they brought that home with them, started the podcast, and when everything got shut down, told me a little bit about it. I started listening to them and gained a lot of information, and here we are. I wanted to bring them on to spread that knowledge to you guys. So today we have three types. We have a bourbon, an Irish whiskey, and a Scotch whiskey. Now, before we get into this and before we start drinking, I do need to throw this out there, but we do not condone the drinking under the age of 21, and everybody who is here is at least 21 years of age. So now that we got that out of the way, let's get into the first drink. We have Buffalo Trace as our bourbon today, and Jimbo is going to help talk about what makes a bourbon. So Jimbo, take it away, my friend.
Thanks, Nate. Yeah, so as he said, we are talking about Buffalo Trace, which is a type of bourbon made in Kentucky. Bourbon is a type of American whiskey where the legal requirements for it are that the mash bill that makes up the whiskey that is distilled is at least 51% corn, and then when that distillate is created and aged in a barrel, it is aged in only new oak barrels. That is what separates bourbon from other types of American whiskey. And then, like you said, the whiskey we were talking about today is Buffalo Trace, a very cheap, great bourbon, very popular among bourbon enthusiasts. And I'm never tired of drinking it, and I'm ready to drink more of it right now. So I'm just going to start pouring.
Go ahead and pour yourself some. Joey, you have some of the tasting notes for us on this bourbon?
Yeah, so bourbon's really cool because it's kind of it's the American pastime, and everybody knows about Scotch and Irish whiskeys a lot of time. Bourbon is a huge influencer of Irish and Scotches, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit later. But before we get into tasting, I want to talk about glassware a little bit. So you're always looking for the glassware that has like the tulip where it kind of comes in a little bit. There's all sorts of different glasses that can do that. And I've got a couple here. This is a Capicha. This has a weird Swedish name. I forget what it is. But when you're going in to smell your whiskey, if you're not experienced with it, go slow, okay? Start low, bring it up, give it a little swirl. You'll start to pick out different smells. If you just dive right into it, you're going to burn off all your nose hairs. You're not going to be able to smell anything for a little bit.
Yes, and not to interrupt you, these tulip glasses, most commonly known as Glencairns, the reason they're shaped like this is to help kind of get rid of that ethanol nail polish remover kind of smell, so you actually smell the whiskey, not just the alcohol.
Yeah, awesome. And you see, I've yet to find myself a Glencairn, so I still have the rocks glass that I'm drinking out of.
Have fun with that.
I know I'm still able to get a little bit of the smell. But again, that dry erase marker really hits you right in the face when you don't have a
smell influences taste a lot. So if you're not smelling it properly, you can't taste it properly a lot of the time. So I highly recommend you Amazon these
So on this one, we're getting oranges, we're getting vanilla. Vanilla always is a go-to, especially for bourbons, because it comes out of that oak barrel so well, that charred oak barrel. So vanillas, caramels, little bit of fruitiness with the orange. And it's a pretty mild smelling bourbon. Like it doesn't hit you with a lot of things going on. It's very simplistic, which a lot of people are looking for the complex drinks and everything. Simple bourbon is always good too. It's like just the smell of it is warming as well. So yeah, orange, a little bit of orange. You get some molasses, vanilla, that kind of thing in there. The Buffalo Trace website says you can get mint. I have yet to get mint on this. Jim, are you getting any mint?
I don't get mint. I don't see that on the website. I see notes of brown sugar and spice, and oak, toffee, dark fruit, and those come up more on the taste, but they say mint on the nose.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but on one of your podcasts, I think you guys both mentioned that whenever you drink a bourbon, if you say caramel and vanilla, you're always right.
Yep.
Yeah,
even if you don't know anything, caramel, vanilla, you're always right.
It seems like caramel and vanilla are very, very common flavor profiles that come from the oak barrels.
Correct.
And with bourbon having to be aged in new oak, those flavors are always going to be in there.
Yep.
Awesome.
So, as we go in for a taste here, if you haven't had high proof alcohol like recently, like if you're going to taste whiskey and this is your first taste of high proof alcohol within the last couple of hours, your first sip's always going to hurt. It's going to burn.
Absolutely.
Get through it. The second sip is where you're going to get all those tasting notes. So, gentlemen, cheers.
Cheers.
That was a horrible clink. There we go.
That one never gets old. I mean, that one, I usually have a bottle of that on my shelf at all times. I mean, out here where I'm at, it's very easy to obtain it. I know you guys have a little more difficulty sometimes finding it in stores.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
but
it flies off the shelves a lot, but it's cheap. It's $20-$30.
Yeah.
So it's always worth it.
Yeah, and what was the alcohol by volume? Was it 45% on this?
45%, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So with the taste, it's going to be brown sugar, spices, and when we say something is spicy or has spices in it, in the whiskey world, that's going to mean like your pepper, like a ground black pepper, different kinds of like cooking spices that it's not like
it's not Tabasco
buffalo spice. Exactly. Yeah.
It's not hot sauce. It's like you said, pepper,
aromatics,
cinnamon, cumin,
right?
Stuff like that.
Yeah. Which I definitely on that one I definitely get the cinnamon. It's not. I mean, it's what I think cinnamon should taste like in a whiskey. It's not a fireball.
It's not fireball,
or Jack Fire. Like it is a legit cinnament that tastes good and doesn't overwhelm your system.
It's not cinnamon flavor added to the whiskey. It's just a natural occurring flavor that presents itself.
Yep. And it's got a nice long finish too with that kind of sweet sugariness. We get a little bit of a dark fruit on there as well, but
I would almost say it's almost like a brown cinnamon sugar.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
That's what I think it tastes more like than just regular cinnamon, is that brown.
Yeah, it's such a smooth, simple whiskey. This is a great bourbon, and it's got darker notes to it as well. Just not only with the color, but with the flavor profile as well. Like when we get into Irish. The Irish whiskey that we have isn't as light as some of the Irishes, but Irish whiskey tends to be a lot lighter with the citrusy notes and more of a refreshing whiskey rather than kind of like a warming winter whiskey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, since you mentioned Irish, do you guys want to jump into the next one? Are you guys ready for that?
I would love to.
Alrighty. And I've been waiting for this one all day. This one is my absolute
another drink
favorite.
of Buffalo Trace there.
Go ahead, Jim. Yes, Joey, the Bushmills Black Bush. And when I first started getting into whiskey, Jimbo had recommended the Jameson Black Barrel, and Joey had recommended the Bushmills Black Bush. Fell in love with both of them, but I think Black Bush is probably my favorite out of the two. Sorry, Jim. But with Bushmills, the thing that I love about it is the flavor. Joey's already smelling it.
That's a good place to start.
The flavor and the smell. So correct me if I'm wrong on this, but with Black Bush, it is aged in sherry casks.
Yeah, Spanish Oloroso Spanish Oloroso sherry casks. So Oloroso is a type of sherry. But yeah, Spanish Oloroso sherry casks.
Okay. Those are also the barrels that wine is used or aged in as well, which is why when you
well, sherry is a type of
whiskey,
wine.
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's aged in X wine barrels.
Awesome.
Spanish wine barrels.
Yeah. Which is why when you drink this, you get those fruity undertones on the whiskey. For me, it's really not one fruit or the other. Like it's just like fruit. I can't pick out one fruit more than the other.
Yeah, again,
I'm going
it's
to pour
going to be
myself a little if you want to talk about
absolutely,
it a little more.
yeah. So again, this one has a lot of dark fruits coming forward because it uses that Oloroso sherry cask, and that's a very kind of it's a thick red wine. It's pretty powerful in terms of taste and smells. So that comes through from the barrel very, very well. It soaks into the barrel as that Oloroso sherry is aging, and then when they pull that sherry out, they put their whiskey in, their Irish whiskey in, and the Bushmills takes on a lot of those characters that the Oloroso sherry had. Not as strong as the Oloroso sherry, but it's going to be those like that kind of hearty fruits, the cherries, the dark fruits, and then even like some peach a little bit in there and some kind of a nuttiness to it as well.
Yeah. I do have the tasting notes pulled up right now on the whiskeyjug.com. And it says a warm malt glides over the palate, dragging notes of caramel, vanilla, toffee, spice, and peanut brittle. It says finish with a middle fade of orchard fruit, dark sweets, brittle that drifts out to ash.
Yeah.
And it says a good balance in flavors and aromas with a medium body and soft, smooth texture. So it says overall that this person likes the Bushmills Black Bush, and it also joined the Jameson Black Barrel as one of their favorite Irish blends.
Yeah. So yeah, that malt flavor that it mentioned goes right over the back of the tongue. It's beautiful, beautiful.
I don't know if you guys have already taken a sip yet, but I'm going to go ahead.
Oh yeah,
I have.
I've taken like 2. But yeah, to bring us back a little bit, this is like the interesting thing about this whiskey. I don't think it's very typical of what an Irish whiskey is because it's heavier than most.
I would agree with that.
It's because it's only aged in the wine, so you're getting a lot more like darker fruits that we talked about in the tasting notes, and we're not getting as much of like what we typically get with like floral and like light citrusy notes on what we get with like a lot of Irish whiskeys. But that's kind of like the fun of what Irish whiskey is, because Irish whiskey, it's not like American whiskey where it has all these rules. It just, you have some sort of mash bill, some sort of grain, and a distillate that's aged in barrels for at least 3 years. It doesn't matter what mash you use. It doesn't matter what kind of barrels it's aged in. So you get all these different distilleries doing all these different experiments and coming up with all kinds of different whiskeys. So that's kind of like the big difference between like European whiskeys like Irish and Scotch versus American whiskeys that are a little bit more specified. But it leads to just so much more like fun experiments, which is why we fell in love with our Irish whiskey so much when we were over there. But yeah, even though this is not your typical Irish whiskey, it's so delicious, and there's a reason why it's so renowned all across the whiskey world.
It's a good cheap intro whiskey at $30 a bottle here in Ohio. You get a lot of good flavors on it. It's not super strong. It's only 40% ABV. Very, very nice whiskey to get into.
This bottle I got in Arizona was $34.
Yeah, I think it's $29.99 for us. Yeah.
And they have cheaper options from the Bushmills line. The Black Bush is like a little bit pricier. So if that's a little bit too much for you, their Red Bush or their traditional is still a great intro. But
that's my favorite is the Red Bush.
I know the Red Bush is your go-to.
Yeah.
And funny story about
it's so good. They're all great.
Funny story about Bushmills. I've had the Black Bush, I've had the Red Bush, and I've had just the regular Bushmills. My slow pitch softball team were sponsored by a bar out here, and I went out and before the game had a couple whiskeys, and I asked for Bushmills. They had Buffalo Trace was the first one. I had a bourbon, and I was like, I'm going to go Irish. So I asked for Bushmills. The girl was like, oh, I don't think we have Bushmills. Let me go check. She had to go to the back and found a bottle of Bushmills. And when she came out, she was like, we only have this bottle because one other person that comes here drinks this. And turns out he was sitting at the end of the bar, and it was this 85-year-old man. And here I am at 27, and this 85-year-old man bonding over an Irish whiskey.
Yeah. So
whiskey is forever.
Yeah, Bushmills is interesting because it is the oldest licensed distillery in Ireland, in my opinion, one of the more underrated whiskeys out there. They still produce a lot, and they have a lot of cool stuff coming out of that distillery.
Yeah.
But oldest licensed distillery and grossly underrated, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm a huge advocate for Bushmills.
Yeah, I feel like Bushmills is a really popular Irish. I mean, it seems to get. I mean, every Irish whiskey gets overshadowed by Jameson.
Yeah, it
and
does.
Jameson's a great
Yeah.
brand.
Mhm.
But Bushmills is pretty popular. But yeah, I mean, I can't give them enough props. What they make is
Mhm.
great, and the fact that it's so cheap and easy to get makes it even better.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add in too, is like the flavor that, especially with the Black Bush. I mean, it tastes, to me at least, maybe you guys have had something a little more expensive, but to me, it tastes like it should be $50, $60, $70 a bottle. Maybe you guys disagree with that, but I just think it's that good that it should be higher priced, and I think it's a steal with the price that it is.
I
would
mean,
agree.
I've had $70 whiskeys that don't taste as good as the Black Bush. So
That's true. Yeah.
a lot of it comes down to personal preference. A lot of,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the pricing has nothing to do with the flavor profile at all. It's more like the work that goes into it. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth when it comes to a
Yeah.
good whiskey for
Yeah.
a cheap price.
Yep. Well, we have one more drink to pour here. This one, I don't think any of us have had.
Not
Is the
this one specifically.
It is the, am I saying it right?
Oh.
Speyburn
Speyburn.
single
my
malt
lighting
Scotch
sucks.
whiskey, and it's aged for 10 years. And we all three have brand new bottles.
That is phenomenal smelling.
That
yeah,
is
I got
amazing. Yes,
That's
that is amazing.
incredible.
Mm.
So
I'm gonna go ahead
I'm
and
gonna
pour myself a little.
Yeah.
You can talk,
Okay,
Joey.
Nate, while you do that, so when looking at a bottle of whiskey, a lot of times there's a lot of stuff going on up here, especially like looking at bottles of wine as well. Some of the things that you can look for are the age statement, of course. Age 10 years, age 12 years, doesn't matter.
Yes.
There's a lot more whiskeys coming out with, or a lot more distilleries coming out with younger whiskeys. So don't let an age statement or a lack of an age statement deter you. There's still a lot of great whiskeys out there.
Yes.
But also this single malt right here, I don't know if that's easily readable, single malt. Those two words are mutually exclusive. Single refers to how many distilleries this whiskey came from. So single, it came from one Speyburn distillery. And malt means it's primarily malt whiskey.
Okay.
So if you like the bourbon that we're drinking, the Buffalo Trace,
Yes.
it's at least 51% corn mash. This is at least 51% malt mash. Same with a rye whiskey. So the single and malt, one distillery and malt whiskey. It's not a single malt grain, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So to help expand on that a little bit, when you say malt, we're talking about malted barley.
Correct,
For clarification. Yeah. And you say single as in comes from one distillery. That means that one distillery has sourced the water. It has sourced the grains for the mash bill. It has sourced all the ingredients for the whiskey. They haven't pulled resources from other distilleries or other businesses in the area. Is what that's kind of referring to, correct?
So when you're
Yes.
talking
Okay.
barley is the base of all whiskey, correct?
No, so barley is
No.
a grain,
No?
and
Okay.
again, when we say that when it's a malt whiskey, it's malted barley. So that means it's at least 51%
Okay.
malted barley. Just like corn is a grain, or wheat is a grain, rye is a grain, barley is a grain. It's used in a lot of whiskeys, whether it's a 4% mash bill of barley or a 90% mash bill of barley. It's in almost every single whiskey as a flavor profile, but it's not in all whiskeys.
Okay.
Yeah. Because the thing with whiskeys is that now, I mean, in the current day and age, everything is much more. There's a lot more trade going on than there ever was before.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, there's hundreds of years. I mean, Ireland and Scotland were making whiskeys before America was even created. So when they were making whiskeys, they were using what they had. So malted barley and barley are the primary grains in a lot of Irish and Scotch whiskeys because that's what grows in Ireland and Scotland. And they still use a lot of it today just because of the history with it, but also because it's a great flavor. Just like with how American whiskey, we have a corn whiskey or bourbon
Corn all over the place, and
because
rye all over the
we
place.
have a bunch of corn, we have a bunch of rye, we have a bunch of wheat, so that's what we used. So that's why you don't typically see those things, you see it a little bit more now in newer whiskeys that people are kind of messing with because it's easier to ship things from one area to another. But just due to the history that whiskey has, a lot of people still use like the primary sources of grain around them, and it's also cheaper. But it all makes for great different flavors. So that's kind of why you hear about malt and barley a lot with like Irish and Scotches, and like wheat and corn and rye with Americans, because that's just it's a history and it's what we have.
Yeah, and with this, it is from the Speyburn is from Scotland. I don't know if we mentioned that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've never had anything to drink from Scotland ever.
You are in for a treat.
I've only had one Scotch, and
okay. I was gonna say we've definitely sent you a Scotch. Yeah, okay.
Well, I had the Monkey Shoulder, and which one did you guys send me? I'm trying to remember. Was it Glen Scotia? That was a.
Yes.
I do have Glen Scotia, so that was probably it. Yeah.
I did get
one.
sent some Glen Scotia. Yes. But yeah, just the Monkey Shoulder, and then this is the first one that I've had from Scotland. Any of you guys have the tasting notes on this by chance?
Of course we do, but I'm going
on.
to go in
This
and
is why
start
you were the
smelling
expert.
this.
Yeah, go ahead and let's
So first of all, this is super sweet. Like I'm getting like honey and toffee on it, and
yeah,
I'm getting a little bit of citrus too. Like it's a very light smelling whiskey. Oh, that's just glorious.
And I'm not getting a whole lot of peat, which is interesting.
Yeah. So Jim, talk a little bit about peat now that you mention it.
So peat is one of the primary differences between Irish and Scotch whiskeys. Typically, you're not going to get a whole lot of peat in Irish whiskey. You'll usually get it in a lot of the Scotch whiskey. Scotch, by the way, if you hear Scotch, it's just whiskey from Scotland. It's Scottish whiskey. That's just shorthand. And what peat is a type of moss that grows in both of those countries, and it's like a turf that it can be used to kind of burn instead of like kindling, like small woods and stuff like that. And it has this very earthy, clay-like kind of quality to it, both in smell and taste. And you'll notice that in Scotches specifically, it has this like smoky profile. They'll use this peat as their as an ingredient in their distilling process to kind of give Scotches this like extra burning, kind of smoky, earthy flavor to it.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound appealing. I will say the peat flavor and profile is a very acquired taste.
Yes, especially if you're used to like American bourbons.
Yeah, it
like
takes a while to push through that peat like tones and try and get to some of the other flavors. But there's some great Scotches that have peaty notes on it that are just absolutely amazing. This does not have any peat on it.
Is this an unpeated?
I don't know. It didn't say on there. But I'm not getting any kind of smokiness or peatiness on it.
So it actually says that on the bottom of the bottle here, it says that it's matured for 10 years in American oak, ex-bourbon, and ex-sherry casks. So with it being sherry, that's where you're probably getting those fruity undertones from.
Probably,
yeah.
I mean, to me, maybe I haven't acquired the nose for it yet. To me, the Irish and the Scotch start to smell a little bit the same. I don't know if that's...
There's definitely similarities to it,
Yeah, I mean, obviously Ireland and Scotland are very close to each other. So when they started making whiskey around the same time, the processes are very similar. The ingredients and the stuff they have growing in them are very similar. So that's why I said earlier, like, primarily Scotches will have peat in them. Primarily Irish won't have as much. It's just like one of the big distinguishing factors between the two. There's exceptions to both rules. This seems like it's one of them, where it doesn't really have a whole lot of peat to it. But yeah, I mean, Irish and Scotches, they are very similar sometimes. Yeah, that's not a bad thing.
Do you guys
tasting
want
time?
Take a sip?
Yes,
yeah,
please.
Let's taste it.
Oh, the cheers in Ireland and Scotland is sláinte.
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 That is ridiculously smooth.
Man, that went down like water, and I get a little bit of peat now. The peat's a little bit of there.
A little bit of smoky earthiness.
On the back.
I agree with you. Yeah.
But I'm getting like butterscotch. I'm still getting those citrus notes in there. Some vanilla. Oh man.
Yeah. I definitely get like I definitely get like orange. Like I want to say like orange, like the kind of citrus I'm getting. I get like
getting some of that malty graininess too.
The second you said butterscotch, I almost started to feel like I had like butter kind of like going down my throat because it was like so smooth and like coating to like the inside of my mouth, and it's so good.
That's crazy, dude. And okay, again, $30 Scotch, like phenomenal.
$26 in Arizona. you can get this, $26. And I was telling Jimbo, you weren't here for this earlier, but I was telling Joey when I was at the store trying to buy it. I'm sitting there in the Scotch aisle, and I'm looking at all these bottles, and I can't find it. And then I realize it's sold in a box, and I've never bought anything in a box.
Yeah, it came in this box.
Joey's
right
got
here.
the box right there. Yeah,
That will.
This box is a little extra, but
Yeah,
it is. Yeah,
yeah. But Scotches especially are big fans of boxes.
yeah, and
It seems like they love the packaging.
With me being a little bit newer, still getting into all of it and still learning, when I see a box, I immediately think it's out of my price range.
Yeah.
I immediately think that it's going to be $100, $200, $300, and just I'm not going to be able to afford it. But to see, yeah, I mean, most of them are. But the fact that this one here is $26 and comes in a box and it tastes as good as it does, I mean, this one's probably going to end up being a regular
staple on the shelf.
Yeah, I mean, this one is just amazing.
Yeah, Scotches really like to put their stuff in boxes. I feel like most of them are in boxes versus not.
Now, is there a reason behind that?
I mean, it looks cool. I think that's a lot of what it is.
Yeah.
I think they just I think it's just an eye piece. That's all it is.
They like killing the trees and putting it in boxes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can recycle paper. It's fine.
That's true.
I mean, I think it's just something. I think it's just something they do to try to grab your attention. It looks nice on the shelf. It protects the bottle. Someone could probably say something about how it protects the bottle from light to keep it or some BS. I don't know, but I mean, they just look nice. I think is kind of like the primary thing.
Yeah.
But even the cheap, this is one of the cheaper scotches. McClellan's is a very common cheap scotch that comes in a box that looks really nice.
That's a cheap peated one. That's pretty good.
Yeah. So it's, I don't know. It's just a thing that they do. It seems like.
Yeah, I was kind of joking around with Joey earlier before we got started, and I was opening all my bottles up to get ready, and it was like, oh, we should do an unboxing like people do with shoes. Oh, you see, the packaging here is so nice, and they put this nice little decal here, and they have the age on it. And I mean, it usually just ends up in the trash anyway. But yeah, I mean, this one, I mean, with the tasting, I mean, I've been kind of sipping on it as you guys have been talking, and I've noticed a little bit of the bourbon flavors. Have you guys noticed a little bit of the?
Yeah, that vanilla comes through.
Yeah,
dude. It really does.
Are you guys getting a little caramel? Because I mean, again, caramel with anything bourbon. I mean,
I was getting more like toffee than anything, but yeah, I guess you could say caramel.
So what's a lot of fun is, especially in the whiskey world, you don't say caramel or vanilla very often. You elaborate it into oh, this is like a creme brulee or a baked Alaska. Your fruits, people throw out.
It's not sugar; it's creme brulee.
Fruit. Yeah.
Yeah. Now on your podcast, you guys actually have a little, what do you call it, a symbol or
the pretentious bell.
The pretentious bell. Yes.
Pretentious bell. Yeah. We try to cut through a lot of the BS just to kind of get down to the enjoyment of the whiskey. And the part of that fun is making fun of the sarcasm and being ironic about how ridiculous it is. And Nick Offerman released his own version of Lagavulin, and he uses dance moves to describe how whiskey tastes.
One of the best things I've ever read.
I haven't tried it yet, but it is a phenomenal read on how this whiskey profile is. It's really good. Yeah.
I mean, if you don't know who Nick Offerman is, you might be living under a rock. But Ron Swanson is probably his biggest character that he's done, unless you guys know of another bigger character. But Ron Swanson is prominently featured in all of the openings and I think the closings of all your podcasts as well. He says there's no wrong way to drink a whiskey.
No wrong way to drink alcohol.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm assuming he's putting the dance moves in there as a troll job.
That's the thing is people get so pretentious about whiskey sometimes, but it's fun and there's not, you don't need to deal with all that crap. And that's what we try to break through on the podcast is just having fun with it.
Yeah. I think you get that with any form of alcohol, whether it's craft beer drinkers, wine drinkers, like the wine connoisseurs. Anything when it comes to a certain type of alcohol. You're
another secret. Another secret is if you're ever drinking wine, just give it a little swirl, especially with red wines. Give it a little swirl and go, ooh, tannins really come through on that.
Yeah, tannins.
Everyone will think you know what you're talking about.
Tannins and hint of cherries. You'll always be right.
Every time.
Yeah.
You can't be wrong with tans and cherries on red wine.
Cherries is like caramel for
Yep.
bourbon. Like it's always going to be there a little bit.
Right on. So out of the three, let me ask you guys this. Out of the three, which one is your favorite of the night?
Oh God.
I know you guys have I know Joey's a little biased towards the Bushmills because that's his baby. Unless this Scotch might have just taken over. But what do you guys think?
Well, so I'll start. So yes, Bushmills is probably my favorite distillery. I love the stuff that comes out of there. Blackbush isn't my favorite of the line. Like, it's very good, but I do prefer some of the others. In fact, Blackbush leans a little more towards Scotch flavor profiles for me. So I would actually say the Scotch is above the Blackbush, but when it comes down to it, Buffalo Trace, man, solid American bourbon right here. Like, it's
USA,
just,
baby.
Yeah.
this is just delicious. It's always been delicious, and it's always will be delicious.
Yep. Jimbo, what do you think?
God, it's rough. I think I might also have to go with the Buffalo Trace. The Scotch is amazing, and I love the Blackbush too. But when it comes down to it, the Buffalo Trace is like, if I have to describe to someone what bourbon tastes like, I'm going to describe what the Buffalo Trace tastes like. It
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
down the line, it checks all the boxes. Whereas these other two almost seem like more outliers to me. They're amazing, and I love them. But Buffalo Trace is just straight up definition bourbon, and it just textbook, and I love it.
The Speyburn is unique because it's the only one of the three that has an age statement on it. And I do like drinking age statement whiskeys because it allows me, and this is going to sound really obnoxious and a little
Get the bell ready.
Yeah, right. But I like to sit here, and when I'm sipping on a 10-year-old whiskey or some whiskey with an age statement, I sit there and think, what was I doing 10 years ago when this first went into a barrel?
Yes. One of the best memories we've had when we were drinking.
Just starting college,
Yep.
One of the best memories that you and I had drinking whiskey was when we were in Ireland, and we drank the Irish whiskey that was distilled in 1993.
Yeah.
That was the year we were born.
Middleton,
and we got that
very rare.
The Middleton Very Rare in 1993. We got that specifically because we were born when this whiskey, was it like when it first went into the barrel?
Yep. It was first distilled in 1993. Yep.
That's amazing.
So that's just some of the great fun that you can have with whiskey. Is just the history behind it, on top of all the great flavors you can experience.
Because that whiskey was created the year we were born, and it waited for us to be drank in Ireland.
It waited for you to travel across the sea, land in Ireland, and drink it.
Yep.
And our paths just crossed at the perfect time.
It's pretty crazy to think about. I think I'm gonna have to agree with you both. The Buffalo Trace is probably my favorite. The Blackbush is one of those ones I feel comfortable drinking, and I will always have on my shelf, and it's very good, and I love it. The Scotch, another one. I mean, it's brand new to me, but I think it's going to end up being a staple on my shelf. And
this is a great. I mean, I don't want to say it's a great Scotch because it doesn't taste like most Scotches, but it's a great whiskey.
Yeah,
I'm not. I don't want. This isn't like. If I want someone to experience like what Scotch tastes like, I'm like, oh, try the Speyburn because it doesn't taste like what most Scotches taste like, but it's amazing.
Yeah. When I drink the Buffalo Trace, and this is why I love it. I mean, I love bourbon in general, but the Buffalo Trace just feels American to me. I mean, I know it's from America, it's from Kentucky, but it feels like it should come with some fireworks, an AR-15, and like just an American flag and a pickup.
One of the best descriptors of bourbon ever heard was that it tastes like a kiss on a sweet summer's day. It's sweet, it's refreshing, it's warm, and
there's never a wrong time for a bourbon either. There's so many, whether it's you're drinking it neat or you have it on the rocks, or even if you're mixing it, there's so many.
You can drink it in the summer, you can drink it in the winter.
There's so many different things you can do with it. And I mean, I don't know if I would say the same about the Blackbush. I'm sure there's a million different ways that you can drink it, but I feel like the Blackbush is one of those ones that you just want to drink by itself. You don't want to mix it with anything because you lose those flavor profiles. Whereas the Buffalo Trace, you have a lot to do.
So as we kind of mentioned earlier, the Buffalo Trace has that simple flavor profile. Where Black Bush, there's a lot going on in that flavor profile, and it'd be difficult to get some other complementing flavors in with that Black Bush. So that's kind of the difference between complex and simple tasting profiles, is that simple ones are easy to work with in terms of mixing. The complex ones, very difficult. And that's where you go from being a bartender to a mixologist, is if you can play around with those complex whiskeys.
Yep, it's not just Jack and Cokes anymore. It's Buffalo Trace and whatever you can throw in there to turn it into a great cocktail.
Yeah, I mean, you got your Manhattans, your Old Fashions, your Rob Roys. I mean, good stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, there's the reason you don't see people mixing like Irish or Scotches with Coke. Like, it just doesn't work.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely not. And you know, the thing with Buffalo Trace too is, like, anytime somebody asks for a good bourbon, it's the first one I mention before anything else. I mean, I've tried a lot of bourbons.
And there's a lot of good bourbons out there.
There's a lot of great bourbons.
There are.
But Buffalo Trace is a classic, and it's simple.
Yeah.
For somebody who, I mean, I haven't even been into this for a year yet, and somebody who's tasted, I mean, as much as I have so far, I think that the Buffalo Trace is the one that I always go to because I'm so familiar with it. I love it. I mean, I've probably tried at least 10 different bourbons by now, and it's still my favorite. Still reigns on the top.
Yeah. It's home, man.
Yeah. It's absolutely.
Home. It's home for you at this point.
Yeah. And even when people come up to me and we just start conversating about the different types of bourbon and different types of whiskey, that's always the one I go to, is Buffalo Trace. And
I mean, that's what I was talking about. I was like, when you look at like the definition of what a bourbon is or what you typically expect from it, Buffalo Trace just checks every single box right down the line. It's definition of bourbon in all the best ways.
Absolutely.
It doesn't throw any curveballs, nothing new, nothing fancy. It's straight, simple, straightforward, easy going down bourbon.
Yeah.
And it does it perfectly.
Yeah. We've tasted a couple whiskeys here. We've talked about the flavors and the smells and what goes into making each one. Do you guys have any final thoughts? And I know, Joey, if you'd like to plug your podcast a little bit, tell us what it's all about, feel free to do that. But Jimbo, let's start with you and some final notes here. Nothing?
I think
I got
put
it
you
all.
On the spot.
I think
any tips for new whiskey drinkers?
I think all three of these whiskeys that we talked about today are great gateways into whiskey. I think they're all easy choices to find, easy to get, easy to pick up, easy to drink. Water them down a little bit, throw some ice in there if it helps you, if you're really not used to it. But I think these are all great, easy first choices if you're looking to have a nice whiskey. So
absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, Jim. Joey?
We've got the podcast On the Nose with Joey Eringman. Jim joins me for almost every single episode. We're getting ready to drop season 3 starting in January, so be on the lookout for that. And we break down whiskey and try to keep it simple and fun. Last thing I'll say is the best whiskey is shared with friends. That's my tagline on every episode.
That is the tagline. I was waiting for it too.
But it's also true.
I figured if we didn't get the bell, we were going to get the tagline. But, again, I appreciate you guys coming on. I know that you guys got some stuff to do, and it's a little bit later where you guys are. So Jim shaking his head no. I know Joey's got stuff to do later tonight, but I appreciate you guys coming on, opening up 3 brand new bottles for me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, and hopefully maybe we will have another episode of this. Who knows? Maybe we can get the podcast into video format and kind of blend that together and start a YouTube channel or something. But
sounds like a plan to me.
Until
watch
then,
out, Joe
guys.
Rogan.
Yeah, watch out, Joe Rogan. Until then, this has been Quarantine Corner. I am Nathan Edwards. Thank you for joining us. Have a good one.